The topic tonight was human decision making, psychology and philosophy. Okay? And in certain ways, it really ties into this issue today with terrorist attacks and ISIS and so forth. There are two different realms that people look at in terms of human decision making. One realm is really psychology, and one realm is philosophy. They're somewhat different, but they have somewhat overlap. Psychology is based upon the human psyche and the human drives. I have a drive to eat, therefore I will eat. Right? That's it. And then what's that drive based on? Usually it's based upon whether the pleasure principle, I like eating this, or it's based upon the fact that I'm in pain because I'm hungry, or whatever it is, but it's a psychological perspective. That's psychology. Philosophy is the realm where you basically make intellectual decisions about behavior. Okay? So if a person says, I understand smoking is bad for me, okay, I shouldn't smoke, it's not because he has a drive not to smoke or a drive to smoke, it's because he's come to a conclusion that this is not good. But on the other hand, he has another drive, and that's the drive to live. The fact is human beings' decisions are really based upon drives. That's what psychology is about. Okay? There's different drives that we have. What philosophy really does is analyze the outside world to figure out what is the information that allows you to make the most intelligent decision based upon your drives. So you may be hungry, I'm going to eat something. Then you analyze the world and say, gee, but it's poison, maybe I shouldn't eat it. Okay? Or it's salt water and that will make me more thirsty even though I am thirsty. That's really, philosophy is really to determine the best way to live, but it always comes down to some aspect of why are you interested in philosophy. I come to a philosophical conclusion. The North Star is 400 light years away or whatever. Okay? Okay, so what? Does it make a difference to me? What the realm of ethics was in philosophy is this information is significant. If God exists, then there's a certain level of behavior you should be careful about. If God doesn't exist, Chas v'shalom, the fact of the matter is that you have a different perception of the conclusion. So if you're really hungry and what's available is a ham sandwich, and you happen to think that ham sandwiches are good, should you eat it or not? Well, if God never told me not to eat it, why aren't I not eating it? But on the other hand, if God told me not to eat it, and that there will be dire circumstances not to eat it, then I'll sit there and say, something, maybe I shouldn't eat it. But the point is what philosophy is about is determining the outside information, but really what it comes down to is a psychological perception of the drive. But then it comes down to what that psychological drive is. And it's not so simple to always determine what that psychological drive is. Okay? Why are people interested in this? Why do they have information and so forth? But the fact they sometimes overlap and they get it off. And then there also comes the aspect of subjectivity and objectivity. If you're making a decision about what is the correct information, the argument is to be as objective as possible. But the fact is our drives really make us subjective. If I'm hungry, I'm going to sit there and say, gee, maybe this is not so bad, maybe I can do this or not. So the truth is our drives also affect our ability to analyze the thing. But on the other hand, objectivity can sometimes make us lose sight of what is absolutely necessary. For example, someone in my share pointed this out today, my share today, that in Christianity, the value is in being selfless and not selfish. So the point is that in that decision, you basically say, it's right to be selfless and to give. Okay, in the extreme, it's always right to give. So therefore, in Catholic priesthood, you take vows of poverty and so forth and so forth. But it gets to a point where it's really, really good if you don't do anything for yourself. But then you're doing something for someone else, so you're basically saying that it's okay for the other person to be evil, be able to be so interested in himself to do it. Now, this actually leads to a very interesting perspective. There was a situation, I forget which pope did this, but this pope made this Catholic priest a saint. Because what happened was, the Nazis came to this Polish town, and they were about to kill this Polish guy there, okay, and this priest came forward and said, instead of killing him, kill me instead. So the Nazis said, doesn't matter to me what Pole I killed. So they killed the priest and let this Pole live. So there was a time, or there was a thing where this priest became a saint. He was made into a saint. Okay, now in doing so, they actually had that Pole whose life he saved, that the beatification of this guy, and so forth and so forth, big deal, and so forth and so forth. But what are you saying about this guy who lived? The saint was a real saint because he gave up his life. But this guy was basically said, "Yeah, I like living." So what kind of guy is he? I mean, what are you saying about him? So basically, in that selfish type of perspective, you're going to end up that one guy ends up a saint, but the other guy has to be a little bit off. A little bit, I'm willing to be a little bit evil to allow the other guy to be a saint. That's really a problem. Okay? In order for this pope, for this priest to become a saint, the guy had to sit there and say, "Hey, I'm willing not to die, so you can become a saint." So the point is that this perception of the subjective idea, you have to come up with it. And therefore, in Judaism, for example, you have much more of an objective analysis, where basically there are times where you're supposed to take care of yourself ahead of someone else, even though there's a value in taking care of others. So therefore, you get that taking care of yourself has, basically in that situation, for example, it would be wrong for an individual to step forward and say, "Kill me," rather than him. Because in Judaism, it's objectively, there's two human beings here, right? There's a famous thing in halacha that a lot of people may not know. The fact is, there are three categories of mitzvot that you're supposed to give up your life rather than transgress. Okay, avodah zarah, idolatry, gilui arayos, the major sexual prohibitions, and shfichus damim, murder. Okay, so someone comes up to you and says, "I'm going to kill you if you don't kill Chaim Yankel over there." You have to sit there and say, "Kill me," rather than killing Chaim Yankel. Okay. Now the truth is in the other category, the truth is what's the source you're supposed to give up your life rather than killing someone? It's a svara. The svara is who says your life is more important than his. It's two lives. They're two equal lives. So the svara is that who says that your life is more important than his. Therefore, you have to sit there and say, it's two equal lives. I'm not going to take action. I'm not going to kill him. But then there's another halacha. I think this is brought down in the Tosfos. There's another halacha. Person comes up to you and says, "I want to use you to kill someone. So I'm going to pick you up and throw you on this other person. And by throwing you on this other person, I'm going to kill this other person." Okay? Okay, and if you don't let me use you to kill this other person as an object, where you don't do an act, right, I'm going to kill you. So it gives a gun to your head and says, unless you allow me to throw you on top of this other person, okay, I want to kill him that way, then I will kill you. In that case, you're supposed to let the person take you to kill him. Why? Same svara. Who says his life is more important than yours? Right? You're not doing any act. You're just basically being the object. And who says that his life is more important than yours? So you're left with the same 50-50. So in a case where 50-50, where you're going to be doing the action that says your life's more important than his. But 50-50, where you're basically as passive as the other guy who says his life is more important than yours. The fact is that really understands the perception of trying to understand these things. But the point is that really brings in the philosophical issue in this. Okay, but in lieu of the fact that we also have the psychology that a person wants to live. Okay, so the point is what I'm really getting at is that human beings are faced with these two mechanics that are necessary in terms of making decisions. One is our drives, which put us in touch with our needs and what is concerned. And the fact is some of those needs are physically necessity for us to live, and some of those needs are just pleasure that adds to the quality of our life, and so forth and so forth. So the truth is, we make decisions to try and make our life as beneficial as possible, and okay. Then, of course, we're left with understanding reality. So we come to decisions that we think fit in with our perspective of the world, and coming to philosophical perceptions. Then we get into issues of how do people come up with those perceptions. And what I was doing today in my shir was trying to point out the problems with faith, is in certain ways faith is just trying to read your own feelings into a statement of reality. Okay? Because I have faith because I want something to be a certain way, and I develop a philosophy. But the truth is even in that regard, you can have people doing acts which seem to be contrary to what would be intelligent acts in the pursuit of their faith. So some people will die for their faith, but what they're really saying is I've come to this conclusion, and they're saying that within this conclusion, it's more beneficial for me to follow this conclusion. So therefore, when a person has faith and let's say does a suicide bombing, what that person really is saying is, I've come to a conclusion, this is reality, and within this reality, it's better for me to die, right, and get what I think will be after I die, than not to die. And the fact of the matter is, if a person's really walked into that perception, that it's become something which is what they believe to be true enough. I'm not going to call it philosophical conclusion, but some theological conclusion, some statement of reality, and you can't get them to change it by saying, hey, I'm going to make it really difficult for you if you have that conclusion, because it's beyond the drive, because they've already come to a conclusion about reality that anything you will do won't equal what they perceive to be the results if they follow their reality. Okay? So, this is really the challenge of psychology and philosophy, and this is what many people are involved with, and what occurs is people don't want to really face the depth of each issue. What do I mean by that? The aspect of how much psychology, how much philosophy is involved in any decision. So when I contend, for example, that there are problems that no one wants to deal with the religious roots of ISIS, what am I really saying? I'm saying that people want to define evil totally within the perception of drives. Okay, they want to see the evil person as basically driven by evil drives. What do I mean by evil drives? Lust, power, right? Violence. So they want to define the human being as totally being driven by their drives. Okay, why? Because if they're totally being driven by their drives, then how do you respond to that type of situation? So here's a drive. Okay, so let's take any drive. How do you psychologically deal with drives? So let's say you want to get someone to stop eating a certain food. You think that food is not good for that person, and you feel that the person is always eating that, he has a drive. So how do you deal with that drive? How do you get that person to stop doing it? What do you do?
Typically point out, etc. Say, give information.
Okay. So
That's supposed to be helpful.
okay, so you could do, what you're doing is some level of negative reinforcement, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if he takes that food, you slap him, right? Or what a lot of people do, or one effective way, is that people put on certain negative tastes, negative things that really taste bad, little certain drops like that on the food. The person comes in and has that food, and basically gets I'm not tasting this again. So eventually the person says, from negative reinforcement, I'm not going to do it again. Okay, that's one way of dealing with it. Another way of dealing with him is through positive, or another way of dealing with it is rewards for other food. So if the guy starts eating celery, he gets more food, right? Okay, so the Playboy bunny comes in and says, "There's your chocolate, okay, but if you eat your celery, you get to spend the night with me." So the guy sits there and says, "Chocolate or celery in the Playboy bunny?" Okay, I'm not touching chocolate. The point is that that's the other way you deal with drives. And the truth is, that's what the punishment system is of our society. You tell people, don't do this, and if you do that, you're going to get punished. Get thrown in jail. Back in the old days, you get lashes, whatever it is. But the point of the matter is you get, or through execution, it's no longer this guy, but the other guy is sitting there and saying, "Gee, if I do that, I might get killed. I better not do it." But that's dealing with drives. Okay, that's dealing with the perception that the person wants to drives, and you really and the person's basically that's the way you respond to things if you're only thinking in the realm of drives, and then philosophy is totally thrown away, or basically your philosophy is the guy basically everyone's got the same philosophy, but this guy's at an evil drive, right? So yeah, this and that. But when you get a philosophy that basically says it's right to go kill people, or it's right to rape infidel women, okay, that person is not just doing it because, yeah, there must be an underlying drive, but that drive might be, he may not like killing people. He may not be, says, my drive is for spirituality. Okay, there's something I saw. I saw with I know, there was a movie about what do you call it, the Nazis in America. And it was a movie about the Nazis in America, and they had one guy who was like a really sweet guy, and they had it was about their camp. We have a camp only for right wingers, for white supremacists, and so forth, and you have this guy in this camp who's a really nice guy, and he's helping everyone else out. So he's a really wonderful guy, okay. And then he starts talking about Jews and blacks and so forth and so forth. He turns to one kid and says, "You think I like hating Jews? You think I like wanting to beat them up? It turns my stomach. I don't want to hurt anyone, but if I don't hurt them, they're going to hurt me. So to protect myself and to protect protect the people I care for and to protect the good people, I have to hurt them. Okay." But it's not because I'm driven to do that. I'm driven to protect the people I like. Or I saw some other thing with a person, obviously it's a drama about having autodafés back in Europe. You think I'd like killing these people? You think I enjoy it? I cry over that. But the fact of the matter is, what am I supposed to do? They're evil, and I have to do this. So the fact is, it's a completely different perspective. You know, what's their drive? Their drive is, so in ISIS, yeah, there might be people in ISIS who have a drive for violence. Most likely, the person who's actually doing the executions, mostly has a drive for violence. But you'd have a certain person in that work. You're talking about the 300 million people, right? Who might have sympathies. They might sit there and say, "I just want to be close to God. I just want to feel the glory of God. I just want to feel," and that involves me killing evildoers. And these people and these infidels are evildoers. So it's not like I like doing it. It's that I have to do it. I keep telling this story. I saw a video on I guess YouTube or whatever. I don't know if it's still around. It was a video about one of these ISIS fighters who bought a Yazidi woman in one of their slave auctions, right? So he gets the woman and he comes out to see this woman. He's very nice to her. "Hi, how are you? Yes, I'm going to be sleeping with you tonight," and so forth and so forth. "But I just want you to know that the imam said that this is right for me to do, and Allah blesses it." Right? So he's telling this woman, "Yeah, tonight I'm going to rape you, but you should know this is the right thing to do." And this woman is looking at him like, "You're crazy," because he's not a thug basically saying, "Hey, I'm going to have real fun basically beating the crap out of you tonight and raping you." It's not like a thug. The person's basically saying, "Listen, you know, I have a drive, and this is an okay way for me to satisfy my drive, and this is okay. So what do you think? Do you think you go up to him and say, 'Listen, you know, if you do that, you're going to get hurt?'" "Oh, well, but Allah says it's okay." You know, the point is that you're dealing with a completely different mindset. That's really an issue that overlaps so many issues involved in human reasoning and how we analyze drives. We look at people and they do things and so forth, and we either put it into a world of drives or their philosophy. The point of the matter is we don't understand the complexity, and we don't understand the overlap, and then we don't really understand the definition of good and evil. Right? Is the good in their thinking process? Is there good or evil in their thinking process? Is there good and evil in their drive? I mean, Catholicism by calling the sexual drive evil, they want to put the good and evil into drive, right? But they want to put it into.
But it's no different.
But they want to define it in their drive. Now the fact is that they have another definition of evil, which is not believing in Jesus is also evil. So they have an evil in terms of how you look at reality, and they have an evil in terms of your drive. But in that kind of perception, you have a much more simplistic way of defining good and evil. This person's evil because he's got this kind of drive. This person's evil because he comes to this conclusion.
The priest is celibate, so it must be good.
But no, it's the other way around. Celibacy is right, and the priest has accepted
right, but it
it.
doesn't take into account the other person's need.
What
The female need. If every
no, they should both be celibate.
Yeah.
No, the priest is not involved, and they should all be celibate. And if everyone's celibate, we won't have any kids, but then Jesus will return. The point is in other words, when I'm saying that good and evil is then defined either by drives, this drive is an evil drive, or this drive is a good drive, or it's defined by certain views of reality, which was really the essence of medieval Christianity. Jews were going to hell because they didn't accept Jesus, right? Therefore they must be evil. But the truth of the matter is that the determination of good and evil then has to be a drive. So that's where you get the whole thing of faith, because the faith is a personal drive. You don't believe, therefore you're going to evil, because you should believe, because it's inside you and it's a drive. No one sits there and says, "Well, it's evil to come to this conclusion," right? Why do you come to that conclusion? But the point is what I'm getting at is that when you start looking at human decision making, it's much more difficult to understand it. And so the fact is what I'm saying in terms of ISIS, right? In terms of ISIS, if you try and just turn them into thugs, then you're sitting there and saying they have the same drive as the thug who basically wants to be violent. Okay? But if you turn them into coming to a certain conclusion that this is actually right, then their activity, then their decision is a little bit different. And their drives are different. The drive may not be a violent drive. There might be a drive of faith. It might be a drive of spirituality. It might be a drive of that. But they still come to a conclusion that this is the right thing to do. Then you have to deal with why they came to that conclusion. So then you have to deal with the fact of whether they actually do analysis or whether they actually come to interesting conclusions. Now that's where you have one of the problems in our world today. That's the problem with Twitter. It's the fact of the matter is that you should really consider the complexity of an issue and how difficult the issue is. Like, for example, right. But the fact is, it exists.
It creates a theology, whether they believe it or not, by virtue of the fact of what they scream.
No, you already made a mistake by whether they believe it or not. The fact of the matter is they create a theology, they have a theology, and let's assume they have the theology and they believe it absolutely true. Can you deal with that theology? The truth of the matter is, are they open to discussions about their theology? No. Because most religions, they work on faith. So once they get you to be brainwashed by the faith, then you can't have an intelligent discussion with them. But guess what? It's not just ISIS, it's everyone out there in so many ways. There's a battle there's an issue where was it? Belgium. There was a province in Belgium that recently banned Shrita. Okay? Religious slaughter. You cannot kill an animal in this province in Belgium unless it's what do you call it? It's stunned. Okay, you can only kill an animal for meat if it's stunned. Okay, now both in Islam and in Havda and Shechita, you have to do. There's a way of killing the animal. It can't be stunned. Okay, so the point is this slaughtering of the animal basically makes Shechita banned in this province in Belgium. Okay, so you read the discussion about it. Okay, here you have two arguments. You have people on one side who are saying this is our faith, right? The only way we can kill an animal is with shechita, okay, and therefore you specifically banning shechita is negatively impacting on our observance of the faith, unless we become vegetarians. But then we have the issues of whether, with all due respect, Joyce, whether vegetarianism is the ideal form of observance of Judaism or not. But then you have a problem that way and so forth. Hey, versus other people who say, no, you should be more careful about animals. And your form of killing animals causes pain to animals, and we have a value not to kill, that even though we understand the human drive, human desire to eat meat, we should do it in the most painless way possible, which is not shechita. It's a great idea within Judaism that was always shechita was the most humane way. Well, now they're saying if you stun the animal and do it other ways, it's more humane. Okay, so this is the argument. Now the point of the matter is it's an argument of values. It's an intelligent argument. On one hand, you're telling people, they're saying we have a value that you should be careful about animals, and you have another value that you should be that the way to kill an animal is through shechita. Now, these two people who obviously come out of completely different perceptions of reality and so forth, can they debate the issue? Well, they most likely debate the issue if they have mutual respect. And then you might have a conclusion where they have to agree to disagree. And say, listen, to us, and based upon our value system, it's really wrong to kill animals that way. So we want to bar it. But we understand why you're against it, and we understand the negative repercussions on you. it's a little bit of a we are forced to make a difficult choice, and we're going to choose to go with animal rights. The Jews and Shechita will sit there and say, listen, we do have concern for animals, and we understand where you're coming from, but Shechita is permitted, and that's the way we can have meat, and according to many people, there are times you should eat meat. Okay, there are viewpoints that say that yes, you should eat meat. Okay, notwithstanding, people within Judaism will say there's absolutely never an obligation to eat meat. Okay, then you have other arguments in between. The point is, though, is that's a worthwhile discussion. That's a discussion you have over values and arguments and so forth and so forth. And people getting together and saying, listen, I know this is going to hurt you by making this decision, but I feel bound by my values to make this decision, with the recognition that I'm going to have negative impact on your values. And how do you do this, and how do you deal with it? But go to Twitter, go to the internet, see how people argue this out. Do you think people argue it out with that kind of intelligence? And what should we do, and what do we do? And boy, it's a tough decision, and well, I understand I'm hurting you, and I understand you feel like you're hurting me, and so forth, and all these issues. No. What you have is two people yelling at each other. Right? So without any respect. Okay? Okay, with this person, these people basically saying, you're cruelist and don't care about animals and all. And the other one's basically saying, no, you're just anti-Semites who don't like Jews. The point of the matter is do you have an intelligent discussion about it? No. Why? Because human decision-making is a very complex process that balances psychology and philosophy and demands analysis with a recognition that some people will somewhat disagree. But the problem in our world today is that everyone just screams. And that's reinforced by perceptions of faith. Why? Because faith is basically saying, I believe even when I have no reason for it. Because that's what it comes down to. I'm saying this is the reality because I believe it's the reality. Okay? And then you have people sitting there and saying, oh, we have to respect everyone's opinion. Right? So the person who has an opinion not based on any intelligence, but based upon some leap of faith, you have to respect it. Wait a second. You know, you believe the moon is made of green cheese. I have to respect that opinion? But the point is that you have real arguments. But the point is that in our world today, and this is the problem, this is what I think is a lot of the problem. The point is that once you understand that ISIS is religion, you understand that they're making decisions about reality. That's where they're working in. They're not making decisions based upon being thugs and working on their drives. They're making decisions about, and then you understand they're making decisions in such a way that it's not analytical, because those type of religions don't want you to be analytical. Because analytical means you have to see the other side. If you're in analysis, I once had a discussion with a rabbi, pretty famous rabbi, and he was arguing about the proof of Sinai and so forth and so forth. And I said to him, okay, I hear your proofs of Sinai. Do you ever send the people you throw your proofs of? This actually was Yerushalayim. He said, across the field to Hebrew U to hear the arguments against your proof? And he looked at me and said, it's awesome. Can't do that. So I said, listen, how can you say that you're absolutely correct intellectually in your proofs if you're not giving the other people the fullness of the intellectual proofs? It's awesome. He didn't answer that question. The point of the matter is I once had a situation where I was talking to a guy who was heavily into biblical criticism. And I really thought the argument of Sinai, based upon 600,000 people being there, was a pretty strong argument. So when I had the opportunity to hear someone hear an argument against it, I said, okay, give me the argument against the 600,000. he looked at me, he said, Ben, you're an intelligent guy. How could you buy that argument? Like, the argument is so weak, how could you buy it? He said, well, and then within 30 seconds, he totally showed me the fallacy with the argument, the problems with the argument. Okay? Okay, but the fact of the matter is, it's not the fact there was 600,000 there. The fact of the matter is what about the transmission of the information in a period of time where the information wasn't totally protected, and there were all different definitions and the different texts and different this and so forth and so forth. How do you and not only that, the reality is there were other arguments in other mythologies that talked about massive events that were totally wrong because it was okay, but they present. Now the truth of the matter is that then he came back and he said to me, "Yeah, but Ben, you know what the real argument is for Sinai?" He says there's one argument that exists that even the historians of ancient history have a real problem with. There is evidence that the Jewish people conquered Canaan. Clear evidence that the Jewish people en masse came in with an invading army and conquered Canaan, conquered Eretz Yisrael. That is clearly identified through archaeological findings. Okay? The problem is there's no evidence of this people existing outside of Canaan to be able to come in and conquer it. Okay? So the point of the matter is, if you sit there and say, that give me a conquest, that Napoleon conquered Germany, let's say, right? Right? Well, before you have arguments, you have arguments that there was a France that existed beforehand that became strong enough to be able to go over and conquer the other nation. All of a sudden, with Israel, all of a sudden with the Jewish people, you have them conquering a nation, but there's no archaeological evidence of their existence anywhere else beforehand. So the big question in ancient history is, where did this nation come from to be able to conquer a country, to be that strong, as an invading army? Okay? He says the only explanation on the books is the Torah. That's the only explanation on the books. Now, of course, the academics don't like that explanation because it involves belief in God and acceptance of another reality. And academics only want to accept this reality. So, but on the other hand, they don't have an answer to that question. He says that's the real argument for Har Sinai. Now, the truth of the matter is you take this another step further. There's a book called Revelation Restored by Rabbi David Weiss Olivni. Rabbi David Weiss Olivni is a very interesting fellow. In terms of scholarship, he clearly would be in the top 10. There's no doubt about that. Maybe beyond the top 10. He was the foremost student of Shaul Lieberman at the seminary. Okay? Now, David Weiss Olivni, in terms of his own practice, is clearly totally Shomer Mitzvahs. Okay. But he's at the seminary, which is JTS and so forth, even though he never really was a member was never really conservative and so forth and so forth. But the truth of the matter is, he does have beliefs which are not totally in line with Orthodox beliefs. For example, he does buy the documentary hypothesis. He says he has problems. He believes strongly that there was a text given at Har Sinai. Believes strongly there was a text given at Har Sinai with Torah Sheba'al Peh. There was a revelation, and Torah Sheba'al and Torah Sheba'al Peh was given at Har Sinai. There's no problems with that. He totally believes that. But he believes that the text was messed up, and the text that we have today is not the same text as the text that existed at Har Sinai. Okay? Okay, he has argument. But on the other hand, he totally believes in Torah Sheba'al Peh. And he says Torah Sheba'al Peh, totally, the Torah Sheba'al Peh we have today is from the Torah Sheba'al Peh at Har Sinai. Now his argument is the problem with the text is they weren't fully protected. Yes, when a Sefer writes down the Sefer Torah, he wants to make sure it's 100%. But the text was available to the masses, and people copied the text. People who were not devout to copy the text. And that's why you see so many different messed up versions of the Torah text in history. Because the text itself could not be protected. Because some guy who was not a believer could get his hands on the text and mess it up. Okay, so he said, but Torah Sheba'al Peh was always in the hands of the Baalei Masorah. Okay, and they were very, very protective about who they passed it on to. You couldn't get into that group of people who followed the Baalei Masorah unless you were accepted by them. And there was no playing games. So the Torah Sheba'al Peh was more protected than the Torah Shebechtav. That's his argument in Revelation Restored, and therefore the revelation we have today is much more based on Torah Sheba'al Peh. The halacha is much more from. He says, and that revelation is absolutely without question. Okay, the fact that the text has problems, okay, that's something else. But the fact of the matter is, what really is the basis of our halacha in Judaism today is Torah Sheba'al Peh, and that was protected. Okay, is anyone? No one can mess it up. So the point of the matter is, why am I mentioning these ideas? These are people who think through these ideas, who deal with issues, and so forth and so forth. We don't have people walking around saying, I believe. And especially those questions, just because you ask a question, of course you should ask a question. But if you go up to a person who says, I believe, right, you're going to ask a question. You go up to someone and say, okay, challenge, prove to me that Muhammad really existed, right? A person who has that kind of ISIS belief, already you're an infidel by even asking the question. So the point is, you have to understand that, but we live in a world of Twitter now. So the person who says you shouldn't hurt animals and doing shrita, he has the same faith in his values based on what? Where does it come from? What are values? Is it right to tell people that they can't follow their... People don't deal with real in-depth questions. Why? Because we can get by. I remember when Twitter came out. This really tells you my idea. I remember Twitter came out. What was it, 160 characters? 140 characters? I said, what kind of joke is this? People are going to make arguments based on 140 characters. Because to me, arguments need substantial arguments. It needs you to work it through and analyze it. But that's the world we live in. We live in the world of 140 characters. And we live in the world of faith. I believe, without any thought. So then a guy who accepts I believe, okay, and the way we get around it is, well, he must be a thug. No, the problem is I believe. But you don't want to go there because that will entail you having to argue it out. And I really see that. I really see that in the media. They never want to go into the analysis and so forth because then the person who takes position A would have to argue it out.
And it doesn't sell.
What? And it doesn't sell. But the point is that, is that I hold A, he holds B. I hold A because it's a fast faith for me, and he holds B because it's a fast faith for him. But we can't argue it out. I really used to see this with battles over abortion clinics. It's like it's two people just yelling at each other. You're going to hell. No, you're going to hell. It's over. My son told me a joke from this comedian called Louis C.K. Have you heard of this guy called Louis C.K.? He's actually pro-choice, but he says, look at these people in pro-choice. They argued against the people who are pro-life, and he said, how rude. There they are standing in front of these things. They're so rude, and they're yelling and screaming, and so it's so rude and disrespectful and so forth. So he says, what do you expect them? They believe a fetus is a life. You're killing people. What? Oh no, I can't yell at you for killing people because it's really rude for me to do that. Right? Of course they're going to be rude. They think you're wrong. But do you think argue about, well, what's life? What's life? Have that kind of real argument and so forth and so forth? Okay, and go back and understand the complexity of the situation? No. It's so clear. It's so clear cut. But the truth of the matter is on both sides. The reason you don't have any complexity is because both sides are just willing to yell and scream, I'm right, you're wrong. And the fact is that it may come from drives, and evil is either drives or it's, you don't believe like me.
But that's the yelling and screaming. That's not the actual act of killing.
So the truth of the matter is, but that's the extreme you're dealing with. The extreme you're dealing with, and this existed, centuries ago against Jews. In Europe, you think they sat down and said, what's his name? One of the American signers, Thomas Paine, one of the American what do you call them? Fathers of independence, framers. Okay, so Tom, I don't know if he actually signed, but he was like one of the American framers of independence, whatever. So he was an atheist. So people argue with him, how can you be an atheist, so forth, so forth. So let me get this right, okay? You're saying this guy came and said that he is divine and the prophet and all these things, right? Okay. And the people who were all there, who supposedly saw him give this argument, and whatever he did and so forth, right? 99% of them said, no, we don't buy it, right? Then, 100 years later, up in Asia Minor, where a bunch of people who never met the guy, right, bought an argument that this happened, down south, hundreds of miles away, 100 years earlier, they bought this argument. So, what do you think I should follow? The people who were there didn't buy it. And they were right there. Don't you think it makes more sense to buy those arguments? Okay? It's a very legitimate argument. You think they argued with that? Why do you think that Christianity had to attack Chazal? Why do you think they had to attack the Pharisees? Okay? Even though their books say, listen to the Pharisees, whatever it is, but the fact of the matter is why did they attack the Pharisees? Because you had people who basically were the scholars of the Torah, people who basically were righteous and so forth, and say, now we don't buy this, right? Okay, and not that anyone ever says that this is the way Jesus was dealt with by Pontius Pilate or whatever. So that's not mentioned in any Jewish source. Okay, but the point of the matter is the Jews they didn't buy it. But some guy in Asia Minor buy it, and therefore we believe the guy in Asia Minor versus the people who actually were there and said, nothing happened here. What are you talking about? Right? So the point is, Thomas Paine had that argument. Hey, how do you think people respond to that? Intelligently? No. Faith. You need faith. The point of the matter is that we live in a world where people aren't thinking. That the truth of the matter is thinking is complex because there's a psychological drive of individuals and there's philosophy, and how you make decisions is very, very complex. And you have to be in touch. Right. You have to be in touch with your drives, your interests, the potential for subjectivity, the potential for objectivity, and you have to recognize that yes, those decisions tie into your drives. Right? And the fact is there's no such thing as a pure philosophical decision, because knowing something to be true doesn't mean anything unless it means something to you, and that's when it overlaps with your drives. And then you have to analyze what your drive is about and how does it affect the decision. These are very complex issues, and the fact is we live in a world where we don't really honestly deal with those issues. And maybe that's the way it's always been in history. Okay, Judaism, by calling people to think, hopefully call people to think about these issues, although in certain ways I get concerned because I see many Jews adopting the non-intelligent, objective, and so forth. Okay, and that's why in Judaism there's a value. Give me the argument for the other side. Okay, but the point is that once you understand the fullness of these different types of debates and discussions, then you really understand the discussion. And the point is, I guess what it comes down to in ISIS is that no one wants to go there. Okay, the truth is that the problem is here are people who are working on faith. It's a problem of understanding the challenge of faith and how you come to conclusions. No one wants to go there, that these people are making decisions on what they think is reality, because that would create an obligation for you to start thinking about those things. But therefore, everyone would like to just turn it into they're a bunch of thugs, and that makes it easy. Yeah.
But then, like, I wrote a lot of the conservative media, and just about everyone says basically what you're saying. It's not all of Islam, it's not most of Islam, but it's a not insignificant part of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So a lot of people do, their eyes are open to that. It's not as if no one is willing to face that.
The fact is that people are beginning. The truth is that that statement. It's not just that statement. It's the statement has value by recognizing the greater complexity of the issue. See, what happens is once you understand that, then you should start thinking about the issues. What bothers me is, by the way, I see that also. I see that, and the liberal media had a real hard problem with Trump, because in certain ways they want it's. In certain ways, they're happier just calling Trump a racist by not liking all Muslims. The fact of the matter, the fact that Trump was accepted by Saudi Arabia and Muslims is an indication it's not all Muslims that are with ISIS. And Trump said basically, join with me in fighting ISIS, and these guys says, yes, we're with you. And the fact is that people are now having a problem. There's an interesting problem happening in Eretz Israel right now. That the Palestinians are having a real hard problem now, because they basically try to call their terrorism qualitatively different. We're not terrorists, we're freedom fighters. And therefore we understand we're against the terrorists, but what we're doing is not terrorism, we're freedom fighting. Even though what they're really doing is the exact same thing of targeting civilians. What's happening now is the world is not buying it. So when Denmark comes back and says, "What? We gave you money and you named this place after a terrorist," they said, "No, he's a freedom fighter." No, she was a terrorist. She killed a bunch of innocent kids. Okay, and this is happening now, and now the media is coming out and saying, that the Palestinians gave $1 billion for terrorism and stuff like that. The fact is that there's certain now issues because people are trying to deal with not accepting the simple language. There's people who are understanding that you can't just buy the simple story or the easy story. So yes, people are now coming out, and this is really what's coming out now. Is there's a certain recognition which Trump has caused by going to Saudi Arabia and saying, "Join me in fighting ISIS." He's obviously saying that there are Muslims who are on my side, right? Now you have issues: are they doing enough or whatever it is? But there clearly is happening. Okay, the fact of the matter is this is having repercussions. But the problem is that it challenges the whole psyche of people. Because the psyche of people is not to think that much. They really want simplistic answers. And that's a real problem. And this is making people think. So the fact is that, and this is an issue with people, being able to distinguish. When you have two people two Muslim women, both wearing full Muslim garb, both being very devout right-wing Muslims. Okay, and there was a video like this just recently of a Muslim woman, an Israeli Arab Muslim woman, who was completely dressed in full, what do you call the thing? Hijab and so forth, with her hair covered and stuff like that and so forth. She wasn't wearing a veil or whatever. And she gave a very pro-Israel speech. And she was making a point.
That was a very good speech.
Yeah, it was an excellent speech.
Yeah, I heard it, yes.
Okay? And she said I'm Muslim. And there were Muslims coming up making statements like that. There's a guy, but the fact is that really throws off people. Now the fact of the matter is that's what really has to come out and so forth and so forth. But then it really creates a problem. Well, how can I tell the good Muslim from the bad Muslim then?
All right, so
Okay.
in this I want to ask a question.
Yes.
How do you then incorporate the females in the Muslim community who are wrongly accused of inappropriate acts and made to be suicide bombers? In other words, it's not necessarily their choice, but this is their so-called punishment, and if they don't do it, they're going to die anyway.
You have to recognize that that's what happens when you're dealing with with a fanatical religious perception. Okay? And the fact of the matter is they're going to die anyway, and this woman was basically given a choice. Listen,
Die and take
you'll
others
die,
with you or die.
or die and you have a chance to be saved, or die and you won't have a chance because the person still has some underlying belief in the system. And not only that, okay, we'll take care of your family. Otherwise, right, we'll get your family the next suicide bombers. The truth of the matter is that these are concerns. But the point is that with what you're saying, you got to be intelligent. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, yeah, it's a difficult situation. And it might be that the suicide bomber themselves might be another victim of it. You know, there was an argument. There are arguments that people don't recognize that some of these people are also victims. Okay, and it becomes much more complex. On the other hand, what I'm arguing is by turning them into thugs, okay, you basically think you have a solution, but the truth of the matter is you won't know how to deal with them. But if you turn them into what they really are, you're left with a complex decision. How do you tell the difference between the good ones and bad ones? How do you make decisions? The fact is that you have to be able to make proper decisions, and it's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a few observations. So first of all, you have presented quite a number of cases where it is very difficult to find a deterministic logical explanation for certain behavior.
Yes.
Now, call it because of faith, call it because of whatever, it doesn't
Right.
matter. The bottom line is that there is no way to make a deterministic correlation between the action of an individual or a small group of individuals and the primary cause that
Okay.
led to this behavior.
Okay.
Now, while I was listening to you, what came to my mind is the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics.
Okay.
Microeconomics is, your talk was microeconomics. Now, macroeconomics has different methods, has different tools.
Yes.
And the macroeconomics purpose is the well-being of the entire society.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they come up with solutions that do not necessarily depend on a deterministic correlation with the primary cause of whatever happened at the micro level, but they come with incentives to change behavior.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, I have two questions. So the question is, what would be the reason that people do not think this way to be able to come up with a solution to whatever problems we have today? So, for example, I don't deal much into politics, but for example, what Trump did in Saudi Arabia, as you acknowledge, he said this in very simple words.
Yeah.
He did not look for arguments. He did
Right.
not look for his right or left. He provided a direction
Right.
that everybody bought into it. Now, this direction would not have been possible to be a bottom-up solution because the diversity of such cases is impossible to converge into such a solution. It has to come from the outside.
Okay.
So that is one example that these problems can be solved. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say is you have provided examples that basically people cannot talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
People have an argument, people have certain opinions, and they don't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's try an extreme case. Let's assume that there are two intelligent people, extremely honest, believers or not believers, anyway. They have a problem, and they want this problem to discuss, to find out what is the solution. One person has opinion A, one person has opinion B. Now, this can be a true situation if opinion A and opinion B are the outcome of a paradox.
Yeah.
If this is not the case, then the two people should talk to each other to find out which solution is either, so to speak, optimal or the truth.
Or they may not be able to get that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So, if they're honest and intelligent, they are going to bring logical arguments every time one person makes a move.
Right.
Like in chess.
Right.
Okay? Now, I believe, depending on the nature of the discussion, I believe that at some point the logical arguments will be exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that is going to lead to opinion A or opinion B is going to be a leap of faith. In other words, there is
Okay.
a minimum gap that cannot be breached. through
Yes.
logic.
Okay. There's a point that's limit of object, and then the fact is you still have to make a decision, given both arguments, and that decision cannot be made through rational conclusion. It's, you want to call it a leap of faith, I call it intuition, whatever it is. It's some method you make decisions. I understand that. What I was getting at, though, is there's a difference between two individuals who argue out something and so forth, and then come to that kind of conclusion, knowing full well that they can't prove their point, that it is an aspect of some kind of intuitive perception of saying what they're doing. That person is going to be very different than the adamant of someone who says, I'm absolutely right. You're going to be a little bit more, this is the decision I'm making, but I understand I have that there's some questions about it, or that I can't absolutely prove it. It changes your attitude towards it. Second, the point is that through the discussion, you're able. It's very different from someone who has a leap of faith back at stage one. The problem is not individuals who actually go through all the analysis and so forth, and then come to this little point and say, I don't have a right decision, so I'm going to go with, I can't prove A or B, so I have to make some kind of choice of A or B. It's very different than someone back at stage one who's basically saying, I'm right because I believe this without even thinking about it or whatever. Okay, so what I'm arguing is not that sometimes you have to make, leap of faith decisions. What I'm arguing is the fact that is that before you get to that point, you got to recognize the thinking, and also you may get to a point where you can't come to a conclusion. Your other statement about macro is very real. The fact is what I was really doing is the fact is the truth is that Trump didn't go in there and say, okay, what do you guys believe? Let's all figure out what Islam's about, and so forth and so forth. He came in and said, basically, okay, I'm assuming you guys want to do this, and if you're into this, you better do it. And the majority basically said yes. And it might be also because they were forced into saying yes. There's an interesting article I saw today that Qatar has kicked out some leaders from Hamas. Okay, some of the leaders of Hamas who are in touch with the Hamas people in Gaza or whatever. Some dignitary from Qatar came to them and said, "Okay, you gotta get out of the country." Now, supposedly, when he came to the country, he said, "Gotta get out of the country." He says, "It's not because we really want to kick you out, but we're being forced to get you out of the country because there's other considerations." The truth is, in a macro sense, there are other considerations. So Trump basically, wielded his other considerations and got people in line. Okay, so the point is,
provided the macroeconomic solution.
Okay, I mean the fact is that, like for example, the truth is that I find that there was something I read where Trump really laid into a boss in private. He really laid into him. Now everyone is concerned about.
I don't think that was so much in private. I thought.
Supposedly it was in private, even more in private. Now the truth is that everyone is there's a lot of reaction to Trump not moving the embassy to Jerusalem. People are upset with him and so forth and so forth. Fact is that what he's done is he's put himself in a better negotiating position with Abbas and the Palestinians. Because what he's done is, okay, I want to do A. Okay? And therefore, in other words, he's come across with a much stronger position. Okay? In negotiations, what's your first position? So his opening position is, I'm over here. Okay? So if you guys don't even want to be in a discussion with me, right? I'm not going to go along with that. I'm going to say, here's where we're starting from. You don't like where we're starting from? Okay, I'll go back to the other position. The point is he's done certain things which you're talking about. Now that's a little bit more micro perspective, but the fact is you come across with a bigger perspective. What I'm doing though is I am doing something on a macro perspective. The truth is I am dealing with a lot of the underlying issues and so forth and so forth. But what I'm saying is that people are so caught up in their own attempt to accept a certain reality that they're going around in circles protecting their reality. You know what I mean? It's like they're just and that means that people can't talk to each other.
Just it's getting late. So,
yeah.
But just very, very shortly, when it comes to people making decisions, so it's not microeconomics, it's macroeconomics.
Right.
It's politics. It's whatever.
Right.
Under these circumstances, in my opinion, there are two broad categories of people. One category of people, composed of about 60 to 65% of the population, make decisions or reach conclusions that are given to them on the plate from the media.
Yeah. Okay.
You have the other 30%, 35% of people who read the media, interpret the media, and make up their own decisions. Once you are in this category, then you can very easily see what is fake from whatever is truth. Now the question is, when you are talking about people making decisions, which category do you have in
Okay,
mind?
so the truth is I think there's a new category. I think the 65% that you talked about. What has occurred is you're right. Most people buy what they're told. Okay, that's why fascist regimes and dictatorships have one press, because you want one statement. Once you have two statements, then people then have to basically pick one or the other. But basically they choose which one they want to hear. Okay? In other words, what you have on both sides, when you have two sources of information, is people choosing which one they want to hear for other reasons, which is ties to their psychology and ties to their drives and so forth and so forth. But there's another thing that's happening in our world today, and that's with the internet, and that's with Twitter and stuff like that, is that people in the 65% are perceiving themselves as part of the 35%. And the fact is that they're now coming to same decisions of basically just, I'm buying the party line, but now they're saying, and I made a decision to buy the party line. And the fact is that's the change in our world today. That I'm not sure if it's 65-35. I think we could turn it might be 75-25. I don't know. But the point is in that 65%, there's a population that's saying, I read on CNN, and they recognize it's not really their decision, and and they'll walk around. There was a video that was done called "What Is a Jew?" years ago, and they asked people, "What do you know about Jews?" So there were people there. Jews are like this, Jews are like that, and some of the statements were so ridiculous because they never thought about it, so they bought whatever they heard. But it wasn't really frightening. It was, but it was like I said, the North Star is 400 light years away. I don't know. I never checked it out, but that's what I read. So now they tell me I might be wrong. Okay, so I'm wrong. That's the way that's the kind of information that in the 65. But then you have this population that says, I heard it, and this is the truth. And then you have the people. Then you have the new population, which I think is increasing, which is trying to argue that they're right, and that's the Twitter population.
I mean,
and that is people basically saying, I've thought it through. Yeah, how much?
I'll give you a counter argument though. This is before the internet, just because I don't want to. Trump is going to be very controversial. I remember when I was a kid or a teenager, all the intellectual media and so on, everyone I thought Reagan was the biggest idiot in the world. Okay, and that's what I heard everywhere. And at that time, there were only 3 American networks, 2 Canadian ones, and you read that in the newspaper and everything else. Okay, and yet the guy won. One time he won 49 states, and the other one he just massively beat Carter like there was no tomorrow. So I think even it's not 65% quite often. Another counterexample is I read that out of 14, they asked people, what are you most concerned about? And global warming is at the bottom of the list, climate change. So basically, no matter how much the media talks, a lot of people make up their minds and they say. But the people make up their minds. That doesn't mean they're making up their minds by thinking. They have other reasons for making up their minds. Right. Anyways, thank you all. I hope this was beneficial.